Bryn Sawyer smiled when I signed the last page of the property settlement agreement. It was a small smile, just enough of a curve at the corner of her mouth that anyone else might have mistaken it for politeness. But I was sitting directly across from her, so I saw it clearly. She had been waiting for that moment for almost a year. Gavin Rhodes, my husband, sat beside her in a conference room at a law firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. His attorney sat on the other side. My attorney, Marissa Kent, sat next to me. More than 60 pages of documents were spread across the table. After 9 years of marriage, the settlement gave me the townhouse in 5 Points that we had once rented out, the Volvo XC90 I was already driving, $620,000 in cash and securities from marital accounts, my negotiated share of retirement assets, and several household items I had listed. I agreed not to assert any claim against the common stock in Arcadian Systems, Inc., held in Gavin's name. No board seat. No claim against his stock options. No demand for part of the company's value simply because I had once been married to the founder. Bryn looked at me as if I had just lowered the lid on my own coffin. She was not a party to the divorce. Marissa had objected when she first appeared. Gavin said Bryn was there because he had a communications meeting with her immediately afterward and didn't want her waiting in the hallway. Marissa looked at me. I said, "Let her stay." I knew exactly why I said it. Some people only understand a lesson when they are sitting close enough to hear every word. Gavin pushed the pen toward me. "Isabel, once you sign the acknowledgement page, we're done. My name is Isabel Hartman." I was 36 years old. I picked up the pen. Bryn leaned back slightly. She wore an ivory suit, her hair tied low, and the gold watch Gavin had once told me was a performance gift from the company gleamed on her wrist. I signed. Isabel Hartman. Marissa signed as witness. Gavin's attorney checked every page. Gavin exhaled. Actually exhaled. Bryn looked at him, then at me. In a soft voice that sounded almost sympathetic, she said, "At least you still have a house, a car, and enough money to start over. Not everyone walks away from a divorce with that much." I looked at her. "You're right." Bryn's smile widened. I continued, "I'm not exactly leaving empty-handed." Gavin frowned. Maybe he knew me well enough to hear something in my tone. I closed the divorce folder. Then I reached into my bag and took out a second one. Navy blue. Not thick. About 30 pages. I set it in front of Gavin. "The marriage is finished." He looked at the folder. "What is this?" "Now we deal with a different relationship," Bryn asked. "What relationship?" I looked at her. Creditor and debtor. No one smiled anymore. Gavin opened the first page. Promissory note number 1. Borrower, Arcadian Systems, Inc., formerly Blue Ridge Data Labs, Inc. Lender, Isabel Hartman. Original principal, $420,000. The next page. Promissory note number 2, $780,000. Then, $1,150,000, $650,000, $900,000, $950,000. 6 notes. Total original principal, $4,850,000. Every one of them had a funding date, a bank wire reference, a board consent, or officer authorization appropriate to the company's stage at the time, the stated purpose of the loan, an interest rate, a maturity date, and the signature of an authorized company representative. Arcadian had paid some interest over the years. It had never repaid the principal. 3 years earlier, the company had signed a debt acknowledgement and extension agreement confirming the entire $4.85 million principal balance and extending maturity until after the next institutional financing, or under a mutually agreed repayment schedule. The person who signed for Arcadian, Gavin Rhodes. Bryn sat straighter. Gavin stopped turning pages. He looked at me. What are you doing? I'm making a formal demand. After you just signed away any claim against the company? Marissa spoke for the first time. No. She pulled the divorce agreement back toward us and opened section 14.6. Ms. Hartman waived marital claims relating to stock, equity awards, and ownership interests identified in the settlement. This provision expressly excludes independent contractual obligations owed to either spouse by third-party entities. She looked at Gavin. Arcadian Systems, Inc. is a Delaware corporation. The company is not a party to the marriage. Bryn said, but that money was what you gave your husband when he was building the company. I turned to her. No, the company borrowed it. What's the difference? I used to be an auditor, I said. There's a very large difference. I took out another page. Bank wire. From Isabel Hartman's separate property investment account to Blue Ridge Data Labs, Inc. operating account. Memo. Loan proceeds pursuant to promissory note number 1. I looked at Bryn. You work in branding, you're not required to know deep accounting. I understand. So don't celebrate too early. Gavin closed the folder. Isabel, we need to speak privately. We don't. $4,850,000? Principal. You know the company can't wire that out in one day. I'm not asking for it in one day. He paused. Then what do you want? I want Arcadian to formally confirm the balance within 10 business days and propose a repayment schedule consistent with its covenants and liquidity. Gavin stared at me. How long have you been planning this? I thought about the question, then answered. I didn't start planning when I discovered the affair. Bryn glanced at him. I started 10 years ago. What? I did one thing right. I placed my fingertip on the first promissory note. I kept the paperwork. 10 years earlier, Arcadian Systems did not exist under that name. It was Blue Ridge Data Labs, a supply chain analytics startup working out of an aging rented office in Raleigh. 3 employees, 2 laptops that crashed constantly, 1 old printer, 1 customer in pilot, and less than $38,000 in the corporate bank account. Gavin was 30. I was 26. I had just left a large accounting firm after 3 years in audit and transaction advisory. I was not endlessly wealthy. But I had separate property. My mother died before I married. She left me a small duplex in Richmond, Virginia, and a brokerage account built from my father's life insurance proceeds and her savings. I sold the duplex. I did not mix the proceeds into a joint account. The money went into an investment account in my name alone. Marissa would later call that the luckiest financial decision I ever made. Not because I expected divorce. Because tracing became simple. When Gavin told me he wanted to leave his job at a logistics software company and start Blue Ridge, I believed in him. He did not have much cash. About $110,000 in savings. A prototype, an engineer named Simon Keats, 1 sales contact, and an almost unshakable belief that his product could change the way distributors managed inventory. I didn't say, don't do it. I said, show me the model. He asked, what model? 12-month cash model. He looked at me as though I had switched languages. We don't have revenue yet. That's why you need one. I spent 3 nights building. Headcount, cloud expense, software licenses, legal, insurance, office costs, customer implementation, sales travel, tax reserves. Gavin looked at it and said, you make startup life look terrifying. I make it look like itself. He laughed. I loved that laugh. Blue Ridge survived its first 6 months. In month 7, a large customer delayed a contract. We had about 5 weeks of payroll left. Gavin called me from the office at 1:18 in the morning. Isabel, If we don't pay the supplier by Friday, they shut off the data connector. If that goes down, the pilot dies. How much are you short? About 380,000. I drove to the office. Simon was asleep on the sofa. Gavin was sitting in front of his laptop. I put a folder on the table. He opened it. Promissory note. He looked at me. What's this? The company borrows $420,000 from me. We're married. Yes. So we still need a note? I'm not lending to you. I'm lending to the corporation. Gavin gave a tired laugh. The corporation is 3 desks and me. Then you need paperwork even more. Isabel. Money moving from a personal account into a legal entity needs a basis. He went quiet. I don't want some accountant 5 years from now asking whether this was equity, a gift, an advance, or a loan. Gavin picked up the pen. If the company dies? Then I'm a creditor of a dead company. You'd still sign? I'm already here. He looked at me. Why is the principal 420 instead of 380? 40,000 of buffer for payroll taxes and legal. He laughed. That is so you. He signed. I wired the money the next morning. Blue Ridge survived. That was the first loan. It was not the last. Over the next 2 years, Blue Ridge borrowed money from me 5 more times. I did not rush in every time the company ran short. Sometimes I refused. Sometimes I made Gavin cut headcount first. Sometimes I pushed sales to collect overdue receivables. Sometimes I required vendors to accept milestone billing. I did not want the company to learn that every cash shortage could be solved by the founder's wife wiring more money. But when Blue Ridge genuinely needed bridge capital, I lent it. The second note, $780,000. Used for implementation staffing and part of a cloud commitment after we signed a regional distributor. The third, $1.115 million. Used to cover a working capital gap ahead of a major Southeast rollout. The fourth, $650,000. Used for supplier payments and an insurance deposit after a customer delayed acceptance. The fifth, $900,000. Used to support the acquisition of a small analytics module the board believed we needed. The sixth, $950,000. That was the last one. Total principal, $4.85 million. Every loan came from traceable separate property accounts. None passed through our joint checking account. No memo said, family support. Each promissory note identified the corporation as borrower, Isabel Hartman as lender, interest rate, maturity, prepayment rights, governing law, and an express statement that my marriage to the CEO did not change the nature of the corporate obligation. I did not write those clauses because I distrusted Gavin. I wrote them because I had audited too many small companies where founders mixed personal money, company money, family money, and then 5 years later, nobody could remember what anything was supposed to be. Gavin used to tease me. You're so romantic. I said, thank you. He laughed, but he signed. The board approved what required approval. Simon Keats, by then Chief Technology Officer, signed minutes from 2 of the meetings. An angel investor named Howard Bell documented another advance. The company bookkeeper recorded the debt properly. Nothing was hidden. There was no secret note locked in a safe. The loans appeared on the books. Interest accrued. 1 year Arcadian paid me about $240,000 in interest. I paid taxes on it. Everything about it was boring. That was exactly why it later became powerful. Boring records tend to outlive promises. Blue Ridge began winning customers. In year 3, we raised Series A. The company hired a professional CFO, Leonard Price. I stayed through the transition. 3 months. I handed over. The cash model, bank contacts, vendor files, debt schedule, insurance, tax calendar, and my own loan notes. Leonard asked, "Do you want to convert these notes into equity?" I said, "No. Why not? Gavin's founder equity is already complicated enough. What about yours?" "I want debt to remain debt," he nodded. "Fair." After Series A, Gavin suggested I step away from the full-time role. He did not force me. At least not then. He said, "You've done 3 years. The company has a CFO now. You've already given up too much of your career for this. Go do what you want." I asked, "What do you think I want? Travel? Charity? Maybe consulting. Maybe nothing." He smiled. "I make enough now." I did not feel insulted. I was tired. 3 years in a startup had drained me. So I agreed. At first, I still attended some board meetings as an observer, then less often. Nobody locked me out. The company simply got larger. More departments, more management layers. Gavin got busier. I built another life. I joined a nonprofit that taught financial literacy to women, ran a half marathon, visited my aunt in Virginia, hosted Thanksgiving. For a while, I was genuinely happy. Blue Ridge later changed its name to Arcadian Systems as the business expanded beyond warehouse analytics into supply chain forecasting and vendor risk software. One important detail: it was not a new legal entity. It remained the same Delaware corporation, same EIN, same liabilities. Only a certificate of amendment changed the name. I knew because Marissa later checked carefully. At the rebranding event, Gavin stood on stage and told the story of 1 founder, 3 employees, a product nobody believed in, and starting from nothing. I sat in the second row. Bryn was not in the picture yet. No one was having an affair. But something still tightened inside me. Starting from nothing. His nothing included $4.85 million I had loaned the company, 3 years of my work, and almost all the separate liquidity I once had. I said nothing. At the time, I still believed. Why list everything? We're married. The company survived. That should be enough. Over time, the story became even simpler. Investor interview. My wife supported me. Podcast. My family was very supportive. Magazine profile. Gavin Rhodes bootstrapped Blue Ridge before attracting institutional capital. I corrected him once. We were having dinner. I said, "Bootstrapped makes it sound as if you funded it yourself." Gavin smiled. "It's just press copy." "But it isn't accurate. Isabel, who cares about details from 10 years ago?" I looked at him. "The lender." He laughed. So did I. Back then, it was still a joke. 3 years before the divorce, Arcadian was arranging a new financing facility. Lender diligence surfaced the founder-related debt. The CFO, who had replaced Leonard, asked whether I wanted to extend the maturities on certain notes. Gavin called me. "Isabel, let's sign one consolidated acknowledgement. Easier for everyone." I asked, "Principal?" 4.85. "Interest?" "The company will reconcile it separately." "Maturity?" "After the next institutional financing, or under a mutually agreed repayment schedule." I had Marissa review the document. At that point, she was not my divorce lawyer. She was simply a commercial disputes attorney I knew through a mutual friend. She changed 2 sentences. The most important one read, "Nothing herein converts the notes to equity or waives lender's right to repayment of principal." Gavin signed for the corporation. The CFO signed as witness. I signed. The company paid additional accrued interest. Still no principal. I stored the original. Later, I understood how important that document was. It did not merely extend maturity. It reaffirmed the debt. Gavin had a clean opportunity to say, "This is founder capital." He did not. He signed debt. About a year later, Bryn Sawyer joined Arcadian, 31, Director of Brand and Communications. She had worked for a large New York agency, very good at her job. I do not say that sarcastically. She was genuinely good. She knew exactly what founders should say on camera, what tone Investor Day needed, which small scandal should become a bigger story, and which one should disappear. Gavin liked people who understood his pace. Bryn did. The first time I met her, she shook my hand. "Finally." I asked, "Finally?" She smiled. "Gavin talks about you." I looked at my husband. He said, "Of course." Later in the car, I asked, "What do you tell her about me?" Gavin kept his eyes on the road. "You're my wife." I waited. He did not say, "co-founder." Did not say, "former finance lead." Did not say, "lender." Only, "wife." I did not know why that word made me cold. Maybe because by then I had also become accustomed to letting people describe me that way. The signs of the affair came later. Nothing dramatic. One evening, a notification appeared on the iPad in our kitchen because Gavin had once synced iMessage to it. "Bryn, thank you for tonight. I needed that." I looked for 1 second, did not open the thread. Gavin walked in, saw the notification, paused very briefly, then picked up the iPad. "Brand crisis?" I asked. "At 11 at night?" "Client dinner ran long." I said, "Okay." He exhaled. It was a reaction I had seen many times during audit interviews. A liar is not always relieved because you believe them. Sometimes they are relieved because you stop asking questions. After that, Bryn traveled with Gavin on 3 consecutive business trips. A former employee casually mentioned seeing Bryn leave Gavin's office close to 10 at night. A garage photograph showed Gavin putting his coat around her shoulders. A hotel invoice included minibar charges for 2 people, even though Gavin's travel report listed 1 room. None of those facts proved everything by itself. Together, they were enough. I did not hire someone to follow him. Did not hack anything. I asked one question. One night at home, "Are you having a relationship with Bryn?" Gavin stood beside the bar cart. "She reports to me." I didn't ask for the org chart. "Isabel, yes or no?" He looked at me, then said the kind of sentence people think sounds gentle. "You've been away from the company for a long time. There are things you don't understand anymore." I stared at him. "Which department does an affair fall under? Do I need the org chart for that too?" His face changed. "It isn't what you think." I did not argue. The next morning, I called Marissa. "Do you handle divorce?" "No." "Does your firm?" "Yes." "Why?" "I need to prepare." She was quiet. "You're sure?" "Yes." Marissa's first question was not, "Do you have proof he's cheating?" It was, "What assets do you have?" I listed the townhouse, joint accounts, retirement accounts, the car, Gavin's Arcadian stock, several investments. Marissa listened, then asked, "What about the money Arcadian owes you?" I went silent. "Isabel, I still have the notes." "How much?" 4.85 million principal. "Paid?" "Interest, yes." "Principal?" "No." "Maturity?" "Extended 3 years ago." "In writing?" "Yes." Marissa said, "Then before we discuss stock, send me everything." That was the day I realized something. I had grown so used to thinking of that money as part of the past, that I had nearly forgotten that, on the company's books, it was still a current obligation. Marissa and I divided the situation into 3 categories. 1. Marital property. 2. Separate property. 3. Obligations owed by third parties. Gavin wanted all 3 folded into one negotiation. I refused. His Arcadian stock was largely rooted in premarital ownership and had gone through multiple financing rounds, grants, repurchases, and tax elections. There could be marital appreciation arguments, compensation components, expert disputes. A fight over stock could take a year, cost hundreds of thousands in legal and valuation fees. I did not need to win everything. I needed to leave the marriage cleanly. Marissa said, "If you waive a claim to the stock, they'll think you're weak." "I don't care what they think." "You're sure?" "I have a claim that's much easier to prove. The debt." "Yes." She nodded. "Then the settlement carve-out has to be explicit." I did not send a formal corporate demand while the marital settlement was still being negotiated. Not because I was setting some illegal trap. I simply had no obligation to turn the company debt into a bargaining chip in the divorce. I did not want Gavin to say, "I'll give you more of the house if you forgive the debt." If Arcadian owed me money, Arcadian should repay it. If Gavin and I were dividing marital property, that was separate. 2 weeks after I hired counsel, Gavin told me he wanted to separate. He did not confess the affair immediately. He said only, "We've become too different." I asked, "Since when?" "A long time." "Before Bryn or after?" He went quiet. I nodded. "Fine." Gavin looked surprised. "You don't want to try?" I looked at the man who had once stayed up with me until 3 in the morning, working through cash models. "I've been trying for a long time," he said. "I never wanted to hurt you." At this point, that sentence isn't a plan. 3 weeks later, he finally admitted the relationship with Bryn had lasted almost 9 months. No begging. No claim that it happened only once. He said, "I never meant for things to become this." I asked, "Become what?" "Divorce." I laughed. "So you meant to have an affair and keep the marriage?" "Isabel, that's the question." He looked down. I understood. He never planned to choose. Bryn gave him novelty. I gave him home. History. Stability. Someone who knew what to buy for Thanksgiving. Someone who knew which medication his mother could not take. Someone who had stopped asking too many questions. He wanted both systems running in parallel. I was the one who shut one down. When settlement negotiations started, Gavin's first offer was the townhouse, the car, $450,000 cash, and mutual waivers. Marissa said no. The second offer added retirement equalization. The third was close to final, $620,000. Townhouse, car, retirement division. I agreed. Gavin's side wanted me to sign. No claim to Arcadian Systems, Inc., stock or founder equity. I agreed. Then they proposed mutual release of all financial claims arising from the marriage. Marissa changed it to arising between the spouses, and she added Section 14.6 carving out independent obligations owed by third parties. Gavin's lawyers revised it twice. Eventually, they accepted it. Maybe they assumed the language covered only credit card disputes, tax refunds, insurance proceeds, or some minor residual obligation. Nobody asked specifically about the Arcadian notes. I did not have a duty to do opposing counsel's thinking for them. On signing day, Bryn appeared. It was an odd choice. Marissa looked at me when she saw her in the lobby. "I can ask her to leave." I asked the receptionist, "What is she here as?" Gavin said, "Bryn has a meeting with me afterward. We'll be quick." Marissa replied, "She is not a party." I looked at Bryn. She had started dressing like someone who expected to appear beside a CEO more formally. I said, "It's fine." Marissa studied me. "You're sure?" "Yes." I wanted to remember her face when she heard the word creditor. The rest happened exactly as Gavin did not expect. I signed. Bryn smiled. I placed the demand package on the table. Gavin opened it. The smile disappeared. Within 2 hours of the signing, Arcadian's counsel called Marissa, not family law counsel, corporate general counsel, a man named Thomas Greer. He said, "The company needs time to verify these historical obligations." Marissa replied, "Of course. Ms. Hartman is not demanding immediate acceleration beyond the contractual terms?" "Correct. Then why make a formal demand now?" "Because maturity was triggered under the extension agreement after the defined financing event. Arcadian had closed a growth financing facility 4 months earlier. The maturity condition had occurred. Thomas asked, "Does Miss Hartman intend to disrupt operations?" "No." "Then we can work," Marissa said. "Good." I did not send the demand to media. Did not post. Company owes me millions. I wanted repayment, not an audience. Bryn, however, made one foolish move. 3 days later, a business gossip newsletter published. Sources close to Arcadian's founder say his ex-wife received a generous settlement despite holding no current role in the company. No source was named. But the phrase, "no current role," sounded very much like her. I did not respond. A week later, Thomas Greer sent a preliminary response. It did not deny the debt entirely. Instead, it said, "Company records indicate certain historical advances may have been treated as long-term founder support and may require accounting reconciliation before characterization as current debt." I read it. Marissa said, "They're changing the question. Loan becomes support." "Yes." I asked, "What do the books say?" "We don't have the complete history yet." "Promissory notes?" "We have them." "Bank wires?" "Yes." "Extension agreement?" "Yes." "Interest payments?" "Yes." Marissa smiled. "That's why they haven't said the debt doesn't exist." 2 days later, Gavin called. I did not answer. He texted, "We need to talk before the lawyers turn this into something bigger." I replied, "About the divorce, contact family counsel. About Arcadian debt, contact Marissa." He called again. This time I answered, "You really intend to collect all of it?" "Yes." The company used that money to grow. That was the purpose of the loans. You benefited from my success too. From the marriage, yes. Not from company stock. You know I waived the stock claim. He exhaled. Then what else do you want? What the corporation owes me. Isabel, back then we were married. I remember. You gave the money because we were on the same side. I remember that too. Then why count it now? I stayed quiet for a few seconds. Because when I put the money in, you said we were one team so my money could save the company. When we divided assets, you said the company was something you built and I had no claim to the stock. You don't get to use emotion to turn a loan into a gift when that helps you, then use corporate separateness to exclude me from ownership when that also helps you. Gavin went silent. I said, "Pick one logic. You want revenge." "No, I want the ledger to be correct." He gave a bitter laugh. "You're still an auditor." "Yes." For the first time in years, that sounded like a good thing. Arcadian opened an internal review. General Counsel, CFO, Audit Committee Chair, Outside Accounting Advisor. I was not in the room. I did not need to be. They had the records. During week 3, Marissa received a document package. It contained historical trial balances. The first notes had once been recorded as Founder Loan Payable, Isabel Hartman. After Series A, the account became Related Party Notes Payable. After the rebrand and ERP migration, it had been mapped to Long-Term Related Party Funding. It did not say Capital, but the wording was vague enough that a new employee might not know what it actually meant. One internal memo from 5 years earlier contained a sentence: Isabel Hartman has agreed to maintain long-term financial support as part of founder alignment. There was no signature from me, no attachment, no date-specific consent. I stared at it. "What is this?" Marissa asked. "Do you remember the meeting?" On the date listed in the memo, I was in Virginia, helping my aunt after heart surgery. I opened my old calendar. Flight receipt. Hospital visitor email. I had not been in Raleigh. I wasn't there. Marissa asked Arcadian to produce version history. At first, the company said the archive was incomplete. The audit committee instructed IT to recover what it could. A week later, metadata showed that the phrase, agreed to maintain long-term financial support, had been added almost 3 weeks after the meeting date. User account, Executive Office. Approval comment. GR requested revised wording. GR. Gavin Rhodes. I sat with that for a long time. What made me cold was not Bryn. She had not even worked at Arcadian then. 5 years earlier, Gavin had already begun changing the story of my money, not from debt to equity, but from loan to support. One small word, a word that could later become an argument that she never really expected repayment. Marissa said, "This memo doesn't override the notes." I know. But the audit committee is going to care that the language was changed after the meeting. I know that too. I looked again at GR requested revised wording. The affair killed the marriage. But the entitlement had started long before Bryn. A week later, Leonard Price called me. He had left Arcadian 2 years earlier and was working as a fractional CFO for several companies in Charlotte. "Isabel?" "Leonard." "I heard legal is reviewing the founder notes." "Yes. I don't want to get involved in the divorce." "This isn't the divorce." "Good," he said. "There are debt confirmation letters in the old audit archive." "Do I have a right to them?" "Not from me." "I know. I'm just telling you they exist." "Thank you," Leonard added. "In the old days, the auditors used to confirm the balance directly with you every year." I remember. Then ask the company, or the audit committee, to retrieve them through the proper process. I passed the information to Marissa. I did not ask Leonard to send a confidential file. 2 days later, the audit committee obtained confirmation packages from the old audit firm's archive. 5 years, 4 confirmations. 1 year had been skipped because the balance was below materiality relative to the company's post-financing balance sheet. In the others, Arcadian confirmed outstanding principal, $4.85 million, signed by the CFO. 1 year also carried Gavin's signature. Not one confirmation said, converted to equity. No waiver, no release. Then an old email surfaced, not one I had preserved. Arcadian found it in Gavin's archived mailbox after the audit committee requested review. To Leonard Price. Subject: Isabel notes. Gavin wrote, "These are her personal funds loaned to the company, not founder equity. Once liquidity stabilizes, after the next institutional round, repayment should be prioritized. Don't let her take the downside just because she's my wife." I read the last sentence twice. Don't let her take the downside just because she's my wife. There had been a time when he understood perfectly, Then he forgot. Marissa watched me. You okay? Yes. You don't look okay. I'm just thinking about how much a person can change without noticing. The audit committee opened a separate review into the edited memo. Not a criminal investigation. It looked at who changed it, why, whether it affected financial reporting, whether it had been presented misleadingly to lenders or investors. The preliminary conclusion: the memo was an internal narrative document, not formal board minutes. It had never been used to rebook the debt as equity. It did not alter the financial statements. But changing language retroactively without showing a revision history was a control deficiency. Gavin was asked to explain. He said the purpose had only been to reflect that I was not demanding immediate repayment at the time, not to extinguish the debt. Ironically, that explanation helped me. If I had not demanded repayment then, the debt still remained debt. Arcadian was preparing a Series D growth round. Not because the company was in trouble. It was healthy. More than 1,100 employees. Strong recurring revenue. But investor diligence saw $4.85 million in related party debt. Maturity already triggered. A legal demand pending. Historical classification inconsistencies. The lead investor asked, "Will this be resolved before close?" The board answered, "Yes." From that moment, Gavin could no longer call it a private dispute between spouses. It was a closing item. He requested a meeting, this time through counsel. We met in a conference room at Marissa's office. No Bryn. Gavin looked tired. The company can pay $2.6 million immediately. Why not 4.85? Cash planning. Continue. The rest over 3 years. I looked at Marissa. She said nothing. I asked, "Interest?" "Current accrued interest reconciled separately. Security?" "No. 3 years is too long." "Isabel, I'm trying to protect the company." "So am I." He frowned. "If I wanted to kill Arcadian, I would have demanded the most aggressive acceleration position available and taken it public. You didn't." "No." "Why?" I looked at him. More than 1,000 people work there. Most of them have no idea who Bryn is. Nobody in warehouse support betrayed me. Nobody in customer success took my money. I don't want them paying for my marriage. Gavin went quiet. I said, "But the company still has to repay the debt." He leaned back. "What schedule do you want?" I handed over a proposal. $3.1 million, within 10 business days after the financing close, or earlier if available cash allowed. The remaining $1.75 million in 2 installments over 6 months. Accrued interest, settled at the reconciled amount. No prepayment penalty. Default interest only if the agreed schedule was missed. Board approval. No oral modifications. Gavin looked at the page. "You still write contracts the same way." "I hope so." He gave a small, humorless laugh. "If you hadn't been this careful back then, the company would have died." "Yes. Now the same thing is taking cash out of the company." "No." I said, "The loan takes cash out of the company. The paperwork only reminds everyone the loan exists." Gavin looked down. After a while, he said, "I never meant to take your money." "I believe you." He looked up, surprised. I continued, "You simply became accustomed to everything I gave becoming the default. Money. Time. Work. Leaving my own career. You didn't need a plan to steal $4.85 million. You only needed to live long enough as though it never needed to be paid back." Gavin had no answer. 3 days later, Bryn came to see me. Not at home. She waited outside the nonprofit office where I still taught financial literacy classes every Wednesday. I walked out. Bryn stood beside her car. No ivory suit. Jeans. Gray coat. Do you have 5 minutes? Depends what you say. She looked around. Gavin says the company may have to pay you almost 5 million. Yes. After he already gave you the house, the money, the car. I looked at her. Gavin did not give those to me. That was the settlement. Bryn looked irritated. My point is, you already received a lot. What exactly do you want to ask? Do you really have to count every dollar? I smiled. What is your salary? She paused. What? Base salary. That's irrelevant. Suppose Arcadian tells you this month that because you love Gavin very much, your salary doesn't need to be paid. Her face changed. That's different. Exactly, I said. Because when it is your money, you understand it is money. When it is mine, you call it emotion, Bryn said. But you were his wife. Past tense. I don't want to fight with you about that. Then don't. She lowered her voice. The Series D could be affected. I know. Gavin is under enormous pressure. So was I once. Do you want him to fail? No. Then why do this? I looked at her. Because a company with 1,100 employees should not build its balance sheet around the assumption that one woman will always be too embarrassed to collect what it owes her because the CEO used to be her husband. Bryn went quiet. I continued, if Arcadian lacks liquidity to pay under a reasonable schedule, the board can negotiate. If it has the liquidity, it pays. That is business. She said, You're cold. I used to audit companies. I replied, We called it reconciliation. I walked away. Bryn did not follow. 2 weeks later, one final document surfaced. Not a smoking gun, just a badly indexed file. When Blue Ridge changed its name to Arcadian and migrated document management systems, several old legal documents stayed under the folder code BLR Legacy instead of being indexed under Arcadian. A paralegal found Debt Acknowledgement and Extension Agreement. The same agreement I already had, but the company copy included an attached board consent page and funding schedule exhibit. It confirmed aggregate principal outstanding $4,850,000. Not converted. Not forgiven. Repayment. Following the next qualified institutional financing, subject to a mutually agreed schedule that did not violate senior debt covenants. Gavin signed. The CFO signed. The board secretary certified it. I looked at Marissa. So that's it? On existence of the debt? Almost. And amount? CFO reconciliation is finishing accrued interest. Arcadian sent a formal acknowledgement. Principal, $4.85 million. Accrued unpaid interest after prior payments, $312,000. I did not seek penalty interest for periods when the company and I had agreed to defer payment. Total corporate debt settlement, $5.162 million. Repayment schedule, $3.2 million within 10 business days after Series D close, $1.2 million after 3 months. The final $762,000 after 6 months. Board approved. Investor approved. Senior lender confirmed no covenant violation. I signed. Gavin did not sign in his personal capacity. The CEO no longer got to treat the debt as a private marital issue. Arcadian's CFO and general counsel signed for the corporation under board authority. That was my favorite part. In the end, the debt was handled exactly where it belonged. Not in a bedroom, not at the dinner table, not inside an argument about an affair. On the books of the corporation. Arcadian Series D closed 6 weeks later. It was not canceled. The valuation came in slightly below management's target because investors demanded stronger reporting rights after reviewing the historical documentation issues. But the round still closed. The company had new capital to expand. More than 1,100 employees did not lose their jobs because of my divorce. 10 business days after closing, my account received $3,200,000. Reference: Arcadian Systems, Debt Repayment Tranche 1. I looked at the number. Did not screenshot it for social media. Did not send it to Gavin. Did not send it to Bryn. I moved part of it into a tax reserve, part into a treasury ladder, and left the rest in the account while I decided what came next. Marissa called. Congratulations, creditor Hartman. Temporarily. 2 tranches left. I know. How do you feel? I thought about it. Normal. 4.85 million in principal, and you feel normal? I've been carrying it as a receivable in my head for too long. She laughed. That is the most Isabel answer possible. That night, I took out one thing I had kept for years, a black fountain pen. After the first loan, when Blue Ridge survived its first year, Gavin had bought it for me. It wasn't outrageously expensive, but it was beautiful. On the box he had written, "For every document that keeps us alive." I had used that pen to sign 2 of the later promissory notes, the debt extension, several annual consents, and eventually, the divorce agreement. I did not throw it away. I also stopped thinking of it as something that belonged to Gavin. An object given by someone does not mean its meaning has to belong to that person forever. 2 months after the Series D, I started my own company, Hartman Risk and Finance Advisory. Not an investment fund. Not a secret empire. A small LLC in Raleigh. 3rd floor of an old brick building near the warehouse district. On day 1, me. 1 senior accountant. 1 treasury specialist. 1 analyst. 4 people. 6 months later, 8. Our clients were seed-stage startups, family-owned manufacturers professionalizing finance, founders who needed cash controls before institutional funding, and technology companies between roughly $10 and $100 million in revenue that were not yet ready for a full-time senior CFO. Our work included cash flow forecasting, internal controls, contract review support, debt structure, board reporting, founder transaction hygiene. Not glamorous. Very me. Our first client was a 29-year-old founder named Chloe Merritt. Her company built software for home health agencies. Her co-founder was her best friend of 10 years. At our first meeting, Chloe said, "He's going to lend the company about $300,000. Do we really need a detailed note? We've been friends since college." I looked at her. 10 years earlier, I had heard, "We're married." I took out a promissory note template and placed it in front of her. "Best friend is best friend," I said. "Company is company." She laughed. "You've had a bad experience?" I picked up the black fountain pen. "Only with accounting." She laughed harder. I didn't tell the story. I didn't need to. I signed Hartman Advisory's first engagement letter with the same pen Gavin once gave me. Isabel Hartman. No Rhodes, no Arcadian, no founder's wife, just my name. Gavin and Bryn ended their relationship about 4 months after the divorce. I never learned who left whom. I didn't ask. Someone I knew mentioned that Bryn left Arcadian after the board decided the company needed a change in brand leadership. No scandal, no security escort, no criminal case. She joined a consumer tech company in Atlanta. I said, "Okay." Then returned to a client deck. Not every mistress needs to have her life destroyed for a story to end. Sometimes it is enough that she simply leaves your life. Gavin remained CEO of Arcadian. The board did not remove him. The debt review concluded. Historical documentation had weaknesses. The retroactive memo edit was a control deficiency, But formal financial statements had not intentionally erased the debt, and the obligation was ultimately recognized and settled. The audit committee required annual confirmation of related party obligations, preserved version history for amendments, and independent review of founder-related transactions. Gavin accepted the changes. I did not resent him for keeping the company. I had helped build Arcadian. I wanted it to succeed. I simply no longer wanted my own role reduced to a footnote so that it could. 3 months after the first tranche, I received $1,200,000. Marissa texted, "Tranche 2 received?" I replied, "Yes." She sent, "Former almost creditor." I answered, "Not yet." The final $762,000 was still outstanding. Meanwhile, Hartman Advisory signed its 15th client. I hired an office manager. I began speaking at workshops hosted through the Small Business Center at North Carolina State University. My favorite topic: founder money is still money. I never mentioned Gavin, never mentioned Arcadian. I told founders, if a founder lends money to the company, record a loan. If a founder contributes capital, record equity. If it is a gift, call it a gift. Do not let affection become accounting policy. Someone once asked, "Doesn't paperwork like that damage trust?" I answered, "Good paperwork does not replace trust. It protects trust from bad memory, shifting power, and different versions of the same story." I don't know whether anyone remembered that sentence. I did. One afternoon, I accidentally saw an interview with Gavin. I had not searched for it. A client sent the link because she knew I had once been involved with Arcadian. The host asked, "Looking back over Arcadian's first decade, who contributed the most but gets mentioned the least?" Gavin went quiet. I almost closed the video. Then he said, "There were people who contributed enormously before the company was large enough for the media to care." The host asked, "For example?" Gavin looked down. There was someone who helped build finance, put capital into the company when we were nearly dead, and forced me to sign paperwork that I thought was excessively careful at the time. I sat still. He did not say my name. Maybe because of privacy. Maybe because of the divorce agreement. Maybe because he was ashamed. He continued. Later, I told the founder story as though I had started from zero. That wasn't true. I did not start from zero. The host asked, "Do you regret that?" Gavin said, "I regret allowing someone's contribution to become invisible just because she was no longer sitting in the office." I closed the video. Did not cry. Did not message him. I did not need him to say, "Isabel Hartman." I had said my own name enough times by then. The last payment arrived on schedule, $762,000, along with the final reconciled interest amount. No delay, no fight. Arcadian's general counsel sent, "Debt satisfied in full." Marissa texted, "Congratulations, creditor Hartman." I replied, "Former creditor now." She sent 3 champagne emojis. I laughed. That afternoon, I had a meeting with Chloe Merritt. Her company was preparing to raise Series A. The co-founder loan had already been partially repaid according to schedule. Chloe said, "At first, I thought you were making us do way too much paperwork." "And now?" Investor Diligence asked, and I just sent the folder. Good. Do you ever get tired of always being right? I'm not always right. You seem like it. I made one very large mistake. What? I looked at the black pen on my desk. Believing that if you love someone long enough, they will remember the value of what you gave them without you needing to preserve the record. Chloe went quiet. I smiled. "Do not put that in your investor deck." She laughed. A month later, I saw Gavin one last time, in the sense that we actually had to be in the same place. Not to sign anything, not to discuss the debt, We both attended an event for a nonprofit we had once supported together. I walked into the parking lot. Gavin was standing beside his sedan. He looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us walked closer. He simply nodded. I nodded back. That was enough. I no longer needed him to fully understand me, apologize again, regret everything, or prove Bryn had never been worth losing me. There was a time when I thought closure required one perfect final conversation. It doesn't. Sometimes closure is the moment you realize there is no question left that you need the other person to answer. That evening, I went home to the townhouse. Not the house Gavin gave me. The property I received under a settlement both of us negotiated. I repainted it, replaced the dining table, got rid of some old furniture. I did not turn the place into a museum of my divorce. I placed the black fountain pen on my desk. The old box was still there. For every document that keeps us alive, I read the words. Years earlier, us had meant Gavin and me. Then, Blue Ridge. Then, Arcadian. Now I understood the sentence differently. Some documents do not keep a marriage alive. They keep a person from disappearing inside one. The loan agreements did not save my love. They did not stop Gavin from cheating. Did not force him to give me credit. Did not keep us together. But they preserved the truth. Where the money came from. Who transferred it. When the company received it. What the obligation was. And when two people stopped telling the same story, the documents continued telling one consistent version. I used to think my biggest act of retaliation was the moment Bryn stopped smiling in the law office. It wasn't. It wasn't when Gavin saw the $4.85 million principal amount. It wasn't when the audit committee found the email, "Don't let her take the downside just because she's my wife." It wasn't when the first payment hit my account. The biggest moment happened 10 years earlier, when Gavin said, "We're married. Do we really need a loan document?" And I answered, "You are not borrowing from me. The company is." If that day I had simply wired the money with the memo for Gavin, if I had pulled it from a joint account and left no tracing, if there had been no note, no board consent, no extension, if I had trusted love to remember what nearly $5 million was supposed to be, then on the day of the divorce, I might truly have been forced to argue from emotion. But I didn't have to. I had records. That did not mean I had loved him less back then. It only meant I had been professional enough not to require a legal entity to use my feelings as its accounting system. Hartman Advisory grew slowly. That was intentional. No venture raise. No hiring 30 people in 1 year. 8 employees. Then 11. Good clients. 6 months of cash reserves. No personal guarantees unless absolutely necessary. Every founder advance classified clearly. Marissa sometimes teased me. "You turned trauma into a policy manual." I said, "Better than turning it into a podcast." She laughed. So did I. One afternoon, our office assistant asked, "Isabel, that pen is old. Why don't you replace it?" I looked at the black fountain pen. It still writes. Sentimental value? Yes. Good memories? Depends on the chapter. She laughed and walked away. I held the pen for a moment. Not every memory needs to be erased. It only needs to be put in the right place. Gavin belonged to the past. Bryn belonged to a chapter that had closed. Arcadian was a company I once helped build and once financed. $4.85 million was a debt that had been repaid. And I was not the wife who had been left a townhouse. Not the woman without a career. Not a shadow outside the founder story. I was Isabel Hartman, auditor, founder advisor, former creditor, paid in full, owner of a small company bearing my own name, and most important, a woman who finally understood that sacrifice does not have to become loss in order to prove it was once love. I opened a new client agreement. Signed the last page. Isabel Hartman. The black ink dried quickly. I capped the pen. This time, I did not need anyone else to remember how much I had given. I had documented it clearly enough myself.